All right, and welcome to the second episode of Further Inquiry. Today I'm joined by Dr. Ronald Rychlak. He is a law professor at the University of Mississippi, practicing attorney, and author of several books and papers, including Hitler, the War, and the Pope. Today we are going to be discussing Cardinal Stepinac and the Catholic Church's relationship with the Ustaša regime during World War II. So, Dr. Rychlak, how are you today?
Doing well, Alex. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. First question for you. Can you describe a bit of your background? Like specifically, how did you get interested in church history and the controversies surrounding the Catholic Church?
Well, yeah, thank you. I grew up Catholic my whole life. I go to church on Sunday, kind of Catholic, not particularly involved. I had Catholic school for first and second grade in St. Louis, St. Margaret of Scotland, and then we moved to Indiana, and really my formal Catholic education kind of stopped until I was a law professor, and this goes back probably now 30 years. I had a colleague who made reference to, said the Pope was a Nazi, and I'd never heard of the controversy about Pope Pius XII. I went to our local public library, started reading more and more, got more and more interested in the whole issue. That spilled over into Stepinac and other Christian leaders, Catholic leaders during the time. Ended up writing first a one-page thing for our Catholic newspaper here in Mississippi, then ultimately the book Hitler, the War, and the Pope, another book, Righteous Gentiles, then actually made friends with the highest-ranking defector from the Soviet bloc, Jan Mihai Pachepa. He and I collaborated on a book where he talked about, he explained something that was a missing piece about how the Soviets very much wanted to discredit religion in general, Catholic Church, Vatican, papacy, and how they went to Catholic leaders after World War II in these new areas that they now had influence over, and they accused them of collaboration with the Nazis. And if you accuse a Christian leader with collaborating with Nazis, there's no probably better way to discredit Christianity than that.
Absolutely. Definitely. Yeah, you could probably never can't think of a better way to destroy someone's reputation than calling him a Nazi or even a collaborator. So, moving on, can you provide, I don't know if you're knowledgeable in this, can you provide a brief glimpse into the Catholic history of Croatia?
Sure. Croatia became Christian when it was still part of the Roman Empire. So after the fall of Rome, there was a schism that split Christianity into what's now Catholic and Eastern Orthodox. Croatia was in the area that became Catholic. Neighboring Serbia became Orthodox. That actually is sort of crucial to the whole debate about Stepinac today. But Croatia has always been very strongly Catholic. According to a recent governmental census, it was about 79% of the population is Catholic, small percentage Serbian Orthodox, Muslim. When I say Catholic, I mean Roman Catholic. It's been a strong foothold for Christianity, for Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, for centuries.
Wow, 79%. That's quite a number. Now, what was Croatia like before World War I, and how did it change after the war?
Well, during World War I, the Croats mainly fought on the Serbian front, the Eastern Front, and the Italian front against Serbia, Russia, and Italy. The Habsburg monarchy was collapsing, and the peasants were in revolt. The Serbs and the Italian armies advanced towards Croatian territory, and the Croatian government voted to break relations with Austria-Hungary, declared unification of the lands of Croatia, Dalmatia, Slovenia into a new kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenia. So anyway, we're starting to see together what becomes Yugoslavia. They come together to form a nation that existed up until World War II, then broke apart again, then reformed again, and then came apart again. But basically, you're taking people with different cultures, different heritage, different languages, and pushing them together into a single country. And that was the situation that happened following World War One. A unitary constitution abolished Croatian autonomy. In 1929, it was officially changed to the name of Yugoslavia. And Croatian lands were incorporated into the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. You might also keep this in mind as we go forward. People now pushed into a nation that is not what they think their what they feel their allegiance to. And that becomes critical as we move down through what happens in World War II.
Now, what is the ethnic makeup of Croatia? I mean, obviously, like Croats must be the dominant ethnic group, but is there more than just Croats or Croats? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Croats. You hear both ways. Over 90%, like 91% of Croat or Croat. There's a small number of Serbs, about 3.5%, somewhere around there, and then there are a number of small ethnic groups, less than 1% each. But so there's a very strong Croatian feeling in Croatia, and it gets stretched after World War One, and you're now part of Yugoslavia, not Croatia, and that's a situation that again creates what we're moving into with World War II.
Now, the historiography when it comes to this particular topic, Stepinac and the church's relationship with the Ustaša regime, it seems like historiography from the former Yugoslavia and from maybe Serbian and pro-Serb historians is particularly harsh, towards Stepinac and also maybe the church. And from what I've seen, critics have a number of critics have written on this subject, like Victor Novak and his Magnum Creman, the Irish essayist Hubert Butler, who, although to his credit, he did rescue Jews and he was a witness to the Ustaša regime. And there's also, Gideon Grief, William Dorich, and Vladimir Dedigier. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. But for our audience, can you explain what specifically is the controversy surrounding Cardinal Stepinac and the church's relationship with the Ustaša regime? What started all this?
Okay, I mean, and that's great. And that's where we need to start. So we've got Croatia as part of Yugoslavia, but the Croats don't feel Yugoslavian; they feel Croatian. And so there is a desire to have a distinctly Croatian nation. Around 1941, when the Germans invade Yugoslavia and take over, they establish such a nation. They they're really it's really interesting because the Germans wanted to let Croatia and this area kind of work itself out and not have to devote a lot of resources for it. So rather than occupying the area, they emboldened and supported a Croatian group, the Ustaša or Ustaši, to in essence be a puppet regime. But it did create a separate Croatian state. So there were these feelings early on when it first happened, hey, we're going to get our own nation. We're going to get our Croatian nation finally back that we've wanted for so long. We've got this group, the Ustaši, they're going to take over. The Ustaši, it took a minute, but not more than a few minutes actually, to figure out these were really, really bad guys. These were they're statements from Nazis saying, they make us blush. They're so bad. They persecuted Serbs. They persecuted Jews. They claim to be Roman Catholic. They engage in forcible conversions to Roman Catholicism. And when people are critical of Stepinac, they will always point out that when this first happened, Stepinac gave a blessing to them, met with the leaders, and this before all the bad stuff happened. There was a warm feeling that, hey, we're going to get our Croatian identity back. And I mean, it was within months, if not weeks, that Stepinac was recognized as an enemy of the Ustaša. And he was speaking regularly against forced conversions, against persecution of Serbs and Jews. This is written in the Associated Press, Time Magazine, throughout the West where there was free press. Now, there wasn't free press everywhere the Nazis were, but outside of the areas where there was free press, it was widely recognized that he was strongly opposed to Pavlik, the leader of the Ustashi, and very strong in support of those who were being persecuted.
Now, how does this controversy tie in with the entire Catholic Church's record as a whole during the Second World War? Like during the so-called Pious Wars, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, this really is an interesting point that is slanted everything. I'm gonna jump forward a little bit in the analysis here to get to there, but during this era, Stepinac was regularly in opposition to the Nazis, stood well against the Nazis. However, with the end of the war, we get the Soviets moving in and taking over Yugoslavia, and eventually restoring Yugoslavia and ending Croatia. When they first are coming to power, the Soviets are saying, "Hey, we're just like Stepinac. He stood against the Nazis. We're like him. We're against the Nazis. And you're gonna, we're gonna treat you well because we're anti-Nazi." Excuse me one second. Within weeks, they start confiscating church property, persecuting more people, doing bad stuff, and Stepinac becomes an open critic of the Soviets. They decide to put him on trial for collaboration. Now, instead of having stood against the Nazis, they're going to say he collaborated with the Nazis. And they put on a show trial. And you can go back. I actually did go back and look at Time Magazine sent reporters to cover the trial. And as it was going on, Time Magazine is reporting this is a sham. The prosecution prepared for over a year. They gave the defense 1 week. They let the defense counsel speak to Stepinac for 1 hour prior to the trial. Whole kinds of evidence proposed by the defense was disallowed. We later find out there are people who manufactured false evidence for the prosecution. Sort of after the trial, some people defected, and they said, "Hey, here's the stuff we did." But Stepinac gets convicted, sentenced to 16 years to hard labor. They ultimately dropped the hard labor part. But there is the crux of why people today have doubts about it. And when Pius XII, the issue arose in Pius XII, because in the 1960s, the Soviets got behind a play, and they were promoting this play called The Deputy, trying to say Pius XII was an anti-Semite or was against the Jews or didn't care about the Jews. And the allegations change. But there was an Italian author named Carlos Falconi who said, "There are these records from the trial. I'm going to get those records from the trial in Croatia and see what I can learn about Pius XII." And he did get records, and he wrote a book called The Silence of Pius XII. It's all from Croatia. It's all the documents that, and when communism fell, a couple interesting things happened. Communism fell. We now have notes from the Croatian government that were taking place before. If we got them after the fell, but in this time when Falconi's asking for these documents, they're scrambling. They know they've manufactured stuff. They're trying to figure out what can we give him that won't show that this was a setup job. Those documents got released after the Soviet Union fell, after the Berlin Wall came down. In fact, at that time, one of the first things the new Croatian government did was apologize and exonerate Stepinac for the trial that had taken place. But in the interim, back in the 1960s again, I'm sorry to bounce back and forth, but the pieces all kind of fit this way. In the 1960s, Falcone writes his book, and it basically says Pius XII is a bad guy. And how do we know it? We know because Stepinac was a bad guy, and here's all the stuff we got that's court ordered. court documents. Most people looking at in the 1960s at Falcone's book said, gee, he's got court documents, he's got evidence, he had a finding, Stepinac was convicted. They didn't know it was a set-up job. They didn't know it was a rig. You could go, Time Magazine watched it, and Time Magazine wrote about how it was a set-up job. But people are looking at this book. So now when debate about Pius XII evolves, and I've engaged a lot with, for instance, John Cornwell, who wrote the book Hitler's Pope. Cornwell relied on Falcone. There's no excuse for that. By the time Cornwell wrote his book, we knew Falcone's book was tainted, relied on incorrect evidence. But the critics have a book they don't want to give up, so they continue to rely on it in the Pius XII debate. So they're relying upon a staged trial of Stepinac to continue to criticize Pope Pius XII, when we know with certainty now that Stepinac was framed. It was a set-up job, and if you're any kind of, I think, reputable scholar, you figure that out and you say, I can't. And I don't blame Falcone. I assume he was trying to do the right thing. Getting court documents seems logical to me. But we now know that he got tainted documents, and anybody who looks at his work needs to understand we can't rely on it. And yet, critics of Pius XII, critics of Stepinac, still look to that work and works that built upon that.
To your knowledge, have those documents been translated into English?
Many of them have, yeah. In my book Hitler, the War, and the Pope, I include some documents in the back that we reprint, and some of the documents relating to World War II now. That doesn't really relate to Trump. I'm thinking of World War II era documents. You can go back and find the statements from the people who fabricated the documents for the trial, for the prosecution, and their statements have been translated in English, talked about how they set these things up, how they framed Stepinac to make it look like he was a bad guy when he really wasn't.
And Stepinac, if I'm not mistaken, he unfortunately he died in prison. Is that correct?
Well, he was sentenced for 16 years. After about 5 years, they released him to house arrest. He then came down with a form of leukemia, a reverse leukemia, I think it's sometimes called. The technical name I forget, but it's too many red blood cells. And he even made a joke about it once. He said, "I'm suffering from too many reds, both the cells and the communists," because people said he was punished at the end, not because of what his relationship with the Nazis, but because of his relationship with the Soviets. Moreover, Father Peter Gumpel, who's passed away now, but he was involved in he was from the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, and he was investigating Stepinac's case. He said that they excavated, or they don't have to excavate, his body is in the cathedral, but that they got a piece of his thigh bone and tested it, and they have concluded that in fact he was poisoned, a slow poisoning over years, months if not years, but that it wasn't a natural death. And Pope John Paul II therefore has called him a martyr. Yes,
I was actually going to mention that because I saw recently, apparently, I guess like the man who allegedly poisoned him, like I think it's like he's like 103 now. Like he had a recent like reversion to Catholicism. I forget his name, but the man's 103 now, and yeah, he's on his deathbed, if I had to assume. But I mean, I think like he gave a confession that he was the one that poisoned him, but hopefully someone can interview him, like maybe about what he remembers. But of course, like at his age, like I don't know if he remembers much.
Right. Well, gee, I got to find that article. I was unaware of that.
Yeah, I can probably send it to you after we're done here. Can you briefly provide a summary of Stepinac's early life and how he became the Archbishop of Zagreb?
Boy, he was I think the youngest bishop in the world when he was named bishop in his mid-30s. and he was in fact made Archbishop of Croatia, of Zagreb, I should say, Archbishop of Zagreb, before he hit 40, which is actually before the canonical age that you're supposed to be. I'm not really prepared to talk about his childhood and youth.
That's fine.
I don't want to say something wrong, or I read about a lot of different prelates, and sometimes the childhood and early youth things get confused. And if I said something about him that really applied to somebody else, I'd feel bad.
All right, that's fine. Then we can just move on to the next one. Can you talk about maybe specifically the Ustasha movement? What were their origins? Who was their leader? How did they come into power?
Okay, well, the Ustasha, as I said, they were the pro-nationalist, pro-Croatian mini Nazis of Croatia. They were very happy to have the independent state of Croatia. And there were a lot of folks throughout there who wanted that at first. Their leader, Anton Pavlik, he took on a name like Hitler, like Mussolini did. It was Header, I believe it was the way it would translate. But he was brutal and he was cruel, and they opened up a prison camp that they said was worse than what anything the Nazis did. It was not just about Jews; it was about Serbs. They actually treated Roman Catholics and Muslims relatively well. They were both acceptable, but not the Orthodox and not Jews. I mean, we're I guess about as bad as you can kind of think about. The first concentration camp they opened was in April 1941. In June, they passed a law to establish a network across the countries where they would exterminate ethnic and religious minorities. They did wipe out some entire cities. They had notorious atrocities. They think about 100,000 people were killed at just so. I'm not sure I've even heard this pronounced. I always see it written though. Jasovinac concentration camp. And so it was. They were very, very bad people, and they were Roman Catholic, and they did engage in forcible conversions to Roman Catholicism, causing both Pope Pius XII and Stepinac to condemn forced conversion and condemn what was happening. And again, one of the things, when they first came in, you think you're getting something good, and so you can find some things that individuals said in the first month or so that might look welcoming to what they thought they were getting. Within a month, Catholic leaders from Pope Pius to Stepinac on down were not only condemning what the Ustasha were doing, they were being persecuted themselves.
And I guess that kind of answers some of my my next questions. Now, to your knowledge, were Croatian Catholics were they mostly supportive of the Ustashi, or was it a mixture of some being for them, some being against them, or did support dwindle as the war dragged on?
I think when it first happened, you probably saw a reasonable amount of support. I mean, these were Catholic guys who were doing this, or professed to be Catholic, and were not behaving in a very Catholic manner. But before long, the priests, the bishops, Stepinac, are condemning what the Ustasha are doing. And in fact, in October of 42, Stepinac said, "All men and all races are children of God, all without distinction. Those who are gypsies, black, European, or Aryan, all have the same rights. For this reason, the Catholic Church has always condemned and continues to condemn all injustice and violence committed in the name of theories of class, race, or nationality. It is not permissible to persecute gypsies or Jews because they are thought to be an inferior race." The Associated Press in 1942 said Stepinac had become a harsh critic of the Nazi puppet regime, condemning its genocidal policies, which killed tens of thousands of Serbs, Jews, Gypsies, and Croats. He therefore became a harsh enemy of Ante Pavlik, the leader of the Ustasha. In fact, when Pavlik traveled to Rome, he wanted to have a diplomatic meeting with Pope Pius XII. I mean, he went to Rome, he's a leader of a nation. They denied him a diplomatic meeting. They did meet with him. The Pope had a representative meet with Pavlik. So, you know, the church talks to communist China today. The church will talk to people to try to save souls. So they talked to him, but they denied him a diplomatic audience, and that greatly angered Pavlik.
Now, it's well known that the Ustasha, like, they were particularly vicious in their violence. They mainly targeted Serbs and Jews, as well as Gypsies and other minorities. Like, when did the Ustasha begin their, well, for lack of a better word, their genocidal attacks against those aforementioned groups?
All right. Well, they came to power like in early 1941, and I think the first concentration camp was open in April of 41. And then the next month, or I guess it'd be a couple months later, in June of 41, they passed a law to establish a network of concentration camps in order to exterminate ethnic and religious minorities. And again, very, very brutal, very vicious, very, very bad places that they put together.
Do we know how many were killed by the Ustasha, particularly in the, I think it's pronounced Jasenovac, if I'm not mistaken.
Jasenovac, yeah, thank you for pronouncing it. I mean, they estimate about 100,000 people were killed there. And you know, to that point, one of the common objections, one of the common points critics will make, is that there was a particular friar, a Franciscan friar, Tomislav Filipovic, also known as Friar Satan. He was the devil of Jasenovac. How you said that? And he was notorious for brutality. He was defrocked and excommunicated in February of 42. In other words, less than a year after the camp opened, he was excommunicated. This was not, and because critics will point him out and say it was a Catholic priest who did this. Well, he got kicked out of the priesthood for the kind of stuff he was doing really pretty quickly, in the way things tend to process with an excommunication. The Holy See confirmed that excommunication by the summer of 42. So the Croatia, Stepinac kicks him out early in 42, and the Vatican has approved it by summer of 42.
Now, this next question is like probably going to be very controversial. Like, aside from that particular friar, like, to what extent were Catholic clergy complicit in the crimes of the Ustasha? I mean, I imagine like there were probably like a number who were complicit. Like, but from what I've read, like in another paper, like I think it was Mark Biondich, I think like he said, I think that's how it's pronounced. Like, I think he basically said like it was like the younger generation that supported them, but I think it was like the older generation that was like kind of like apprehensive of them. Like, what was like your own research shown?
There was support early. I mean, there's no question that there was support, especially early, before it was realized what happened, before the Vatican spoke out about it, before Stepinac spoke out about it. When we're getting what we've wanted, this freedom, we wanted to have our own nation. Here's this group, they're giving it to us. They're maybe being a little harsh, maybe a little brutal, but a lot of it's behind walls. We don't know exactly what's going on, and so there was support from Catholic priests early in the process. By late in the process, a lot of those who supported it were excommunicated themselves, or they had run afoul of the regime and they were being persecuted because they weren't, these were not friends of the Nazis, the Ustasha. In reality, these were usually good people who had been deceived, misled to believe that this was something good. at first, but once their eyes were opened, and Stepinac, you can go through sermon after sermon after sermon, and articles that he wrote, and letters that he wrote, where he's continually condemning the kind of stuff that the Ustasha were doing.
Now, like specific examples can you think of where Stepinac responded to the Ustasha violence, like any forms of maybe public condemnation, or was it more private condemnation?
No, it was quite public. I mean, it's said that he rescued hundreds of refugees through direct action, but many more through his sermons, where he vigorously condemned the implementation of racial laws. His sermons against the Ustasha abuses were so strong that starting in 1941, the year that really Ustasha came in, the church was not permitted to publish them anymore. Catholics and others opposed to the regime, however, copied them, brought them around, circulated them secretly, similar to what actually was happening sometimes in Italy with Pope Pius XII. In October 1941, the Ustasha destroyed the main synagogue in Zagreb. Shortly thereafter, at the cathedral, Stepinac roared, quote, "A house of God, of whatever religion, is a holy place. Whoever touches such a place will pay with his life. An attack on a house of God of any religion constitutes an attack on all religious communities." February of 42, he protested to the Minister of the Interior about the destruction of Orthodox churches. The Associated Press reported that by 1942, he'd become a harsh critic of the Ustasha, condemning its genocidal policies, which killed tens of thousands of Serbs, Jews, Gypsies, and Croats.
Now to the next question. After the war's end, we know that there were Nazi and Ustasha war criminals who sadly escaped justice through networks that were known as the quote-unquote rat lines. Now, critics have claimed that the Vatican, which seems to imply the Pope himself, was complicit in these rat lines and therefore complicit in protecting them. To what extent were Catholic clergy complicit in protecting Ustasha war criminals and helping them escape, and maybe also Nazi war criminals?
Well, that's something I've written a lot about, and this is my book, Hitler, the War, and the Pope. I've got a big section in there. Here's the thing. Stuff did not get up to the papal level, didn't get to the Vatican. And imagine a war-torn area. People are coming up to a line. You're sitting at a desk and you're saying, all right, what's your name? What's your address? What's your job? What do you do? They don't have papers. We don't have internet. We don't have facial recognition. We haven't seen pictures of everybody. Someone comes up and says, I worked down the street and I was a butcher. They've actually got quotes for people said, for a small amount of money, whatever the local currency was, you get people to swear that was true. And so both the International Red Cross and the Vatican were trying to get people out of harm's way. Undoubtedly, they helped some bad people escape, helped some Ustasha or some Nazis make their way, because they were, for every one of those, they probably, had 500 to 1,000 of, good people who were just trying to get away, to get somewhere that was safe and peaceful. It was very hard to distinguish. That being said, I will acknowledge also that there's at least one Austrian bishop, Hudal, who is noted. He's always pointed to because he seems to have known some of the war criminals who he helped escape. He's very interesting, though, and that people overlook this part. Hudal helped Jews get away from the Nazis during the worst parts of World War II. He didn't think they should be persecuted the way they're being persecuted, and he helped people at the end of the war who he thought were going to be persecuted not be persecuted as well. He tended to help Austria. He tended to be more of a countryman-oriented thing than a Catholic thing, but he did. He knew some, and he helped some. So there was a little bit of that, but there was probably more from the American scientific community than there was from the Vatican of knowing help. The Vatican absolutely helped a lot of people get from war-torn, horrible places to a place of relative safety. And undoubtedly, some very bad people took advantage of that. But almost always, I think it was unknown to the church people who were helping.
Now, after the war, the communist partisans under Tito come in, they take power, and they arrest Stepinac. I think you mentioned like what Stepinac, like they target Stepinac like for mainly because he was an ideological opponent of communism, and like I think you also mentioned what their destruction of church property. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. Well, now they claimed he collaborated with the Nazis, but really the observers who were watching the trial, and there were international observers, said Stepinac's problem was not his relationship with the Nazis; it was his relationship with the Soviets. When the Soviets came in, they began. It's an officially atheistic government, officially atheistic ideology, and you're going into a place, as we talked about earlier, heavily Catholic. How can we get rid of that Catholic identity? Well, the way we're going to do it is we're going to let the people know that the Catholic leaders are really crypto-Nazis, secret Nazis helping the Nazis. So we're going to begin persecuting them. We're going to begin seizing property, arresting. One of the things the Nazis often did, and they did this, the Studia did as well, if the bishop would speak, they wouldn't arrest the bishop, they'd arrest the priests. And so it was like a blackmail situation. So we're going to start arresting and putting people away. Finally, when it comes to a point where we've got things together, we've got a fake trial we can put together, we've manufactured evidence, we put Stepinac on trial. When they make a movie, actually there's a movie I've seen, I think you can pull it up on YouTube, of Stepinac's trial, and it's the movie that the Soviets circulated, where it cuts out basically the entire defense. You see the accusations, and you kind of see Stepinac say something like, "Well, what can I say?" And then he went on. He spoke for 15, 20 minutes or so. That all got chopped out. He didn't see his defense. They circulated this movie that made it look like he was a real bad guy. This was a disinformation campaign from the start to the end. This was done in Poland. It was done. Okay, Cardinal Mindszenty went through the same thing. Wyszynski went through the same thing. Baran went through the same thing. In all these nations that had been strongly Catholic, the atheistic government takes over. They move in. They got to purge that Catholic identity. Best way to do it, we're going to claim that all of these Catholic leaders were actually associated with the Nazis. We'll put them on trial. We'll convict them. We'll arrest them. And they did that in at least those four significant cardinals. And they tried to do something against Pius XII at that time. It kind of fizzled because they couldn't control the courts. Pius XII being in Rome. They waited until after he died to attack him in a different way. But we're trying to purge Catholicism from these newly acquired areas for the Soviet bloc. And this is the model we used, and they used it in all these different places.
If I recall correctly, you mentioned like the defense was only given 1 week, like to like prepare, like
and only 1 hour to meet with Stepinac. Yeah.
Like who was like what did Stepinac have a court-appointed attorney, or did he have to hire his own, or?
He had a court-appointed attorney. He had a bishop, Bishop Hurley from Florida, I believe, who went to be the Vatican's observer, but he was not permitted to consult with him. So the Vatican had an observer at the trial, but Stepinac was not permitted to talk to him.
I don't know. That's just so baffling. Like how people can still think like on that.
Yeah. Well, because you don't know, and because you go back to the Falcone book. Falcone, again, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he thought he was writing legitimately based upon honest court documents. And you read that book and you say, geez, this all looks really bad. Then you find out that the people who manufactured the prosecutor himself, the prosecutor in the case, got away. And he said, yeah, this was not because of anything that Stepinac did with the Nazis. It was because of the relationship with the Soviets.
Now, in the modern era, I assume like some things have changed with regard to the perception of Stepinac and the church during the Ustasha regime's reign. Like, if I'm not mistaken, like I think the current patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church, like has said like that I don't recall exactly what he said, but but essentially like that as if like I think something along the lines of like that Stepinac was not really a bad guy, but like how much like I guess like has like changed like from what you have seen, how much has changed in terms of the perception of like of both Stepinac and the Croatian church during that time? Like,
well, okay, so let's first say just within Croatia, because most people probably haven't been there. I've been to I was to Yugoslavia before everything happened. I've been to Croatia twice. So I've been to Zagreb 3 times, twice in Croatia once, and I was there. I got to speak at the and 10th anniversary of the beatification of Stepinac at the cathedral. His body is on display in the cathedral, and we went on a trip through Croatia. My wife and I actually renewed our vows in a little church in Croatia on our 25th wedding anniversary. And in almost every church, there's a statue, a stained glass window, or a shrine of some type to Stepinac. He is wildly well regarded in Croatia proper. So the people in Croatia still very much love Cardinal Stepinac. There's a book you can buy there. I've got a chapter in it. It's kind of neat because it's written in English and in Croatian. I wrote in English and they changed it. But so within Croatia, now it's really Serbia where the biggest problem is. Those are the Orthodox Christians who have followed up on what they saw from the trial and the work that we've been talking about today that came after the fact. There's an Orthodox bishop in the United States, the leader of the Orthodox Church in the United States during the time of the trial, actually spoke out on behalf of Stepinac, said, this is crazy, this trial makes no sense. But over time, people settled into these positions. There was a joint commission of Orthodox and Roman Catholics, I believe in 2016, who were supposed to come together and study and make a finding about Stepinac. They did not reach a conclusion. The Congregation for the Causes of Saints has beatified him, which means they found he lived a life of heroic virtue. So the Vatican's position is he led a life of heroic virtue, which means he should be close to sainthood, but I think they've held up sainthood because they don't want to, because the leaders of the Orthodox Church in Serbia have said we're going to take that as a slap in the face. And so I think they're trying to work it out, trying to show the Serbs a lot of what you and I have been talking about today. And the Serbs are not, they're not convinced yet. That's I guess where we are.
Yeah, like I was gonna mention like the perception of the Serbs, like from what I've read, like in Dr. Robin Harris's book on Stepinac, like from what it seems like, much like the opposition to Stepinac's beatification and canonization is motivated by a sense of nationalism. But of course, only time will tell if any canonization will actually occur in the spirit of truth. But moving on, from what I have seen, very few books have been written about Stepinac in English and the church's relationship with the Ustasha. Like one book that I've seen that like in particular that is often pointed to as like maybe, I guess you could say like the gold standard for Stepinac is Stella Alexander's The Triple Myth. Now, this was a book that was published in the late 1980s. It's been described as a critical but fair assessment of Stepinac. Like, I was wondering, have you personally read that book or have you heard of it? And like, if so, like, what is your own personal assessment of it?
I have heard of it. I think there are important findings that have come forward since that book that were not known about. And I hate to kind of be show and tell here, but I'll show you, this is another book. I'm co-author of this book, Disinformation, with Jan Mihai Pacepa, the highest ranking defector from the Soviet bloc. He explained what I've been talking about these disinformation campaigns that were cultivated, that where they took the kind of stuff that we talked about Falcone doing it honestly, and they did it overtly dishonestly from within the Soviet leadership. He was the highest ranking defector ever from the Soviet era. And he was right-hand man to Ceausescu, and he was engaged in active disinformation campaigns involving church leaders. We have a chapter on that where we deal with Stepinac in there, because this is so foundational to understanding the situation, that this is not an organic problem that has developed. This is a false narrative that was cultivated.
Since like the publication of Stella Alexander's book, like which was the 1980s, like to your knowledge, has anything new been discovered about Stepinac? Like since that time, like the 1980s, that's like what 40 years by now, like anything new?
Well, I mean, I think we proved, I think the Vatican determined, number one, is that poisoning. I think they completed their positio, that's the life study of his heroic virtue. I think, we've got the Soviet, the insider from the Soviets saying, we cultivated this false narrative. And you mentioned Robin's book. That's a very good book. I wrote a review of that. By the way, there's a Facebook page for Cardinal Stepinac that collects a lot of things. If people are interested, you can go, excuse me, you can go and look at a lot of articles and videos and other things, including the review I wrote of Robin Harris's fairly recent book. That's about 2 or 3 years old, right?
Well, it was 2017.
So, okay. Time goes fast as you get older.
Now, moving on a bit, like to Pope Pius XII, like since the opening of the Vatican archives, I think it was back in 2020, like when the pandemic was in full swing, like has any new material been discovered about Pius, or the church in general, or maybe the church in Croatia in particular?
There's certainly been some new discoveries, and the most recent thing I think written about it, actually, I have an article just appeared last week in Public Discourse. People could take a look at what happened very early. Some people critical of the Pope came in and thought they discovered some stuff that made Pius XII look bad, and they wrote articles saying that and got a lot of attention. And then after a few more months and more research and some other people, even one of the notorious early critics, a guy named Wolf from Germany, changed his conclusions, and now I was wrong in what I wrote early, and most people are backing away from it. The David Kurtzer is the most critical. In fact, I wrote a review of Kurtzer. I think there are 6 books about Pius XII in the archives dated 2020 or later. 5 of them are positive reviews. One of them is David Kurtzer's book, and of course that's the one that gets all the attention. It's a negative evaluation, and I think he got some things wrong. And I think a recent, if people look at the Public Discourse article, they'll see a review of a recent event that took place in Rome, going over the new discoveries.
Interesting you mentioned Dr. Kurtzer's book. I have not personally read it, but from what I do, there is one particular detail that I recall, like I think seeing somewhere in like some online article, like I think like Dr. Kurtzer like discovered like when Pope Pius XII was still, before he became Pope, like I guess like if I'm not mistaken, like they came across like some like documents, like I guess like where the Nazis allegedly like accused or at least found evidence of clerical abuse, like by priests, like during in the Nazi regime, and I guess like Pacelli ordered like those like documents to be destroyed. Like, what is like your personal assessment of that? Like, did maybe like Pius was Pacelli maybe trying to engage in cover up, or maybe was he like wary of it because like maybe he thought the Nazis were fudging the evidence?
Okay, so I mean, maybe you're thinking about something different. The only the only thing close to that I'm aware of is we've had for a long time the Acts and Documents of the Holy See in World War II, which is a collection of documents that were culled from Vatican files in the 1960s by 4 Jesuit priests. And Kurtzer, in one of his early critical pieces, said he found some stuff and it doesn't exist in this collection. And so it wasn't Pius XII destroyed anything. It was that the 4 Jesuit priests maybe were trying to hide this particular document, so they didn't put it in the published documents. That, I believe, was what Kurtzer claimed. Well, on further discovery and further analysis, and I believe I talk about this in public discourse, actually the document what is in the it's mentioned, it's discussed, and maybe like in footnotes or something, but it's not hidden. If you're hiding it, you wouldn't bring it up. It was brought up in some commentary written by the Jesuits. So I think it was, he found something that he thought was bad, and I believe it related to the claim was a backstreet communications between Pius and Hitler, and that it was something that was hidden, and Pius was negotiating with Hitler. Look, Francis talks with the communist leadership in China. You do talk to people, and the communication was not hidden, and that is, excuse me, I remember better now. The Jesuits wrote a memo talking about the communication back and forth between Pius and Hitler. It wasn't anything underhanded or sly. It was the fact that there was communications, and Kurtzer said it's not in the Acts and Documents, so the Acts and Documents are corrupt. Well, it is in the Acts and Documents, and so his point really doesn't make sense anymore.
Now, like since like the publication, like since the new discoveries have been made about Pius, like I know there's obviously Kurtzer's book that was published. Have any other books like been published like that are mainly based on these new documents?
Yeah, there are. There's a and I wish I had the list. If you look at public discourse, you'll see the list of the ones, because some of them are from Italy, one's from France. So they've been written by scholars from around the world. There's Michael Hesserman wrote one that he wrote it originally in German. It's been translated. It's published in the United States now. It's a very big, very complete tome. I know Michael, and I talked with him as he was working on this, and it's, I would say, far superior to Kurtzer's book. He and Kurtzer, as Michael says, he and Kurtzer sat in the same room, basically doing the research at the same time. Michael is out with the Catholic publisher in San Francisco. The name of the publishing house I forget, but it's a very good publishing house he's with. But he's with a Catholic publisher, whereas Kurtzer, I think, is with one of the big New York firms, and so probably doesn't get the same amount of attention. But again, there are several books. Again, I think there are 6 books dated 2020 or later. 5 of them are positive about Pius XII.
To your knowledge, like, are any books, like, are there any future books that are coming up like soon, like, or maybe papers like about this issue, or maybe about Pius XII, or maybe even Stepinac?
I'm always working on something. I've got a paper I was brushing up last night for, I think, the Catholic Historical Review, which will be about the revelations by Jan Mahapachepa, the defector I wrote a book with. But there are always forthcoming books. But I encourage people, if you want to have a solid background about Pius XII, my book Hitler, the War, and the Pope, I think, out with our Sunday Visitor Press, is probably still the best solid background. Mark Ribling has a book called Church of Spies, which is fascinating about Pius XII and his communication with the folks in Germany who were trying to overthrow Hitler and assassinate him, and their communication back and forth. It reads like a novel. It's a great book. There's a lot out there, and they're continuing to come. And I hope to write a book focusing again more on the disclosures of my co-author Jan Mihai Pacepa. If you've got HBO Max is the thing. There's a show called Spy Master, and if you watch Spy Master, that's based on Pacepa's life. So you might get a picture of Pacepa if you have that and watch that.
Knowing like your connections with Michael Hesterman, there was I remember watching a video on YouTube, like there was a recent I guess Croatian book about Stepinac's life. It's a very large book. I forget the author's name, but knowing your connections, if I probably was maybe able to find it for you, it'd be awesome if maybe you can see if you could try to get that book translated and published into English, because from what I've seen, when it comes to material, more material on this, it's usually always published either in Croatian and German or whatever the case may be. There's very little in English from what it seems.
The problem that seems to come up a lot is a good book might be written in Croatian, and the publisher in the United States doesn't want to commit to publish it until they've seen how it translates. And translators don't want to go through the work of translating it unless they're pretty sure it's going to end up getting published. And so you get caught in those crosshairs of trying to do that. And I've helped. Johann Ix is a archivist from the Vatican who also has a brand new book out, and I helped him try to find, and he did find, and his book is the
Bureau.
Yeah, and I actually helped him, but we went through that process of trying to find an American publisher who would commit to publish it, and he worked on the translation himself, which helped a lot. But trying to get a foreign book published in the United States, there's a two-step process that isn't always easy.
Awesome. Well, that's unfortunate to hear, but hopefully, we can hear there's some more material that can be published about this, in the near future. Last question, you mentioned you you're working on something for the Catholic Historical Review. Any other things you want to tell our audience before we end it here?
Well, I mean, the thing that I always think of is Pope John Paul II said, "Be not afraid," and I think that's the way we approach it. We're not afraid to look at the truth, look at what happened. I'm convinced Stepinac and Pope Pius XII were both good men. They may have made a wrong decision here or there along the way. They're not, the Pope, when he's not on the chair of Peter, is not infallible, and Stepinac is not infallible. But when they had time to act and react and think things through, they made the right call, and they never did intentionally bad things. And don't be afraid to say that. Don't be afraid to inform yourself. Don't be afraid, to look. Don't be afraid to look and I'm going to find something bad. I remember when I first wrote Hitler, the War, and the Pope. The first edition came out in the year 2000, and every time there was a new story about Pius XII, this is it. There's gonna be the thing that they're gonna, you're gonna prove I was wrong. And then they're always they were wrong. They come with accusation, and you could easily disprove it. And then there came a day, one time there was a new accusation, and I didn't have that fear anymore, because I knew that Pius XII was a good man. He wouldn't have done that. And I feel the same about Stepinac. And so don't be afraid to look even in the dark corners, because we're not afraid to tell the truth. If the truth ended up being bad, it would be bad. But it's good to know the truth and pursue the truth. And the more you pursue the truth, the more I think we're going to find the truth of the Catholic faith.
Awesome, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rychlak. I truly appreciate this conversation. Hopefully, like the audience will find it informative. I definitely do want to like more explore this topic more. If you like maybe after maybe after this is all over, like if you can maybe like put me like in contact with some I greatly appreciate it. But for now, yeah, this has been awesome. So I greatly appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate it too.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.